Good afternoon, folks. Let's start on time. First of all, thanks a lot for joining us or joining me. Let's start off, right? 2:30 is probably not the best time slot. It's right after lunch. Depending on the food, depending on the weather, it's probably going to put you to sleep. And so I realize you're always up to a challenge and figure out how to do it. So on a serious note, let's get started. My name is Nick Santhanam. I'm a former McKinsey senior partner. I, along with my colleagues, Ashutosh Padi and Gaurav, wrote this book, Titanium Economy. I left McKinsey a couple of years to start our own firm called the Fernweh Group. We'll talk more about it if needed, but not needed, which really, as they say, eat your cooking. We basically said, hey, let's write about it in the book and let's go put it to practice. And towards the end, I'll talk a little bit about that. So I wanted to talk about the book we published last year called The Titanium Economy. So obviously the question is, what is titanium economy, right? That's probably the most obvious questions people will start. So let's start off with that. The disclaimer, so everything I say here is going to be absolutely wrong. You can't hold me to it. Nothing said will be true. So what is the titanium economy? So mainly wanted to talk about three things. Talk about what is the titanium economy. Once we talk about it, what do we learn from that? And then given all the things which has been going on, I would say what's been going on in the last 3 months and probably now what's going on in the last 1 week with all the bank collapse, it becomes even more relevant. What do we do from here? So let's start with what is the titanium economy? For folks who are in Austin, for folks who are in Silicon Valley where I live, the tech space is very clear, the high tech. Whenever I say tech, people say high tech, right? It's almost, there is no need to use the word high because tech means it's high tech. That's actually not the truth, right? There are different types of tech. There's high tech, there's industrial tech, there's med tech, there's ag tech. Tech is just technology. And specifically what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at the industrial sector. And we said within the industrial sector, industrial sector, as you and I both know, is not homogeneous. On one side, you've got the Amazon rainforest. On one side, you've got the Sahara Desert. So you've got steel and cement, which has been around since eternity. And on the other side, you've got automation equipment, robotics, food processing equipment, all of that which has been in the near term. So we want to talk about the industrial technology. And here I'm not discriminating, what is higher technology, lower technology. It's technology basically means there's some technology which allows you to differentiate, which allows you to create a better value proposition to your customer and win. So when you look at the industrial tech or industrial technology, what is very fascinating is if you look at the industrial sector itself, it's the third largest sector in the globe. It doesn't matter whether in the US or stuff, because obviously you have financial institutions, banks, which we're talking about a lot. You've got healthcare, which obviously all of us grow old, all of us get sick. We need to be taken care of. And from a percentage contribution, from percentage of growth, industrials is a big sector. So industrials, as I mentioned, is not a homogeneous sector. We broke it down into what we call micro verticals. Micro verticals meaning sectors which have a very specific application, very particular customers, very similar products. So food processing equipment is a micro vertical. Why? As the name indicates, you process food. It can be corn on one side, it can be chicken on the other, is one micro vertical. Aviation infrastructure, so any equipment which is allowing you to board a plane is a micro vertical, so it's that. So this is a sector we looked at. And what is very interesting is, probably I'll talk about the genesis of when we started writing the book, or when we were at McKinsey, we used to serve, and as soon as I said, hey, we do work in the industrial space, or we do industrial tech, you would almost get a big say, that was a good sector. It was a great. And it's I would be like, whoa, wait a minute, it's not a thing about the past, it's a thing about the future. Because, and we'll talk more, the data will indicate, it is genuinely not a past. It is for the future. The bright days are ahead. And for some reason, I think media does a great job. It's always about gloom and doom, right? For folks who read the book about Jamesville, it's a city which went downhill. The Rust Belt. What do you think about Rust Belt? It's not good. Nobody goes and says, I want to be in the Rust Belt. It's about high-paying jobs, which all went away to China. It's about the gloom and doom. And what we found very interesting, that's not true at all. Like, we started with this thing and said, wait a minute, folks. This sector is misunderstood, undervalued, and unappreciated. So we want to talk about this. So that's the economy, that's the titanium economy. So now the question is, why are we talking about it? What's so great about it? I mean, it's one thing to tell a story. Is there something to learn from that? And what is very fascinating, look, I don't know about you, I'm driven by money. So it's all about wealth creation. These folks have delivered, if you buy a stock in this company, they've done significantly well compared to the index. For people who are big believers in Vanguard 500 or say, hey, you can't beat the market, well, this is a sector which has been in the market. And within this sector, so just to put things in context, in the last 5 years, 10 years, you can break it out any time you want, any horizon, industrials have developed or delivered a 300 basis points alpha return over S&P 500. So you put in S&P 500, you get 9%. You put in the industrial sector, you get 12%. So not a bad return. And even within that, there are a bunch of leaders, not one, not two, multiple leaders who have delivered significantly stellar performance. So I'm sure everybody in this room knows Google. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't know Google? Okay. Everybody knows Facebook. But how many of you have heard in this room a company called HEICO? Okay, good. That's good for me because, it's always good to be a diamond in the rough. But HEICO is a company based in Florida. They make aviation parts. So think about it like any plane you fly, they create the each heat shield so that when the plane lands, it's extremely hot. You don't want to burn up your brake pads and all that. They have delivered 25,000% TRS in the last, not TRS, total return in the last 30 years. And they're in the top 10 performing stock in the last 30 years. So if you go back and say 30 years ago, where do I want to put my money? And then you fast forward to 20 years, it's them. There's only one company in the FANG, the Facebook, Apple, so on, which is ahead of them, which is Amazon. But Google has done worse than them, Facebook has done worse than them, Netflix has done worse than them, and then you come the last year, it actually gets worse. So, and the best part is it's not one company. I mean, for folks who know tech is a thing of, the big guy lives, the small guys all die, right? There's Google. Who's competition to Google? I hope nobody's there from this room from Microsoft, but if they are, they'll say it's Bing, but all of us, even the Microsoft guys actually use Google for search. So versus in the industrial space, it's not one company. It's a sector of live and let live. So there was a lot of learnings because it's a sector which is great. It gives great return. But also, they don't really follow one bullet. There's no really, it's not a silver bullet. It's like you take this. There's a playbook and that works. And then the best part is, okay, what does this all mean for us going forward? We call it the 2 I's. Going forward, we're going to be living in a world of high inflation and high interest rate, or higher inflation and higher interest rates. Look, I grew up in India. In India, 6% inflation is totally normal. In the US, 6% inflation is, oh my God, the sky is falling. Well, for 30 years, we lived in a period of 1 or 2% inflation. At least my philosophy is you're not going to go back to that. If we did, great. We're going to live in a period of relatively, by American standards, high inflation. It's okay, right? 5% inflation is not the end of the world. Interest rates, again, for a decade and a half, we lived with 0% interest rates. For 7 years, 30% of the debts worldwide was negative interest rate, meaning when you gave people money, you had to give them money to keep your money. Cheap money is gone. I don't think it's going to come back anytime soon. And when there's cheap money or there's free money, there's a lot of dumb things you can do, like we saw in the last 1 week. That's going to go away, which means you have to do things differently. And that's also going to give a different ball game for companies. And there's a lot of learning because industrial companies have done that. Industrial companies have not really focused on the 2 I's to drive the value. So anyway, that's the 3 things we want to talk about. We'll go through quickly and then come back. So as I said, what's the titanium economy? It's not one company, right? There's a lot of companies. I mean, you look at search, there's one company, Google. There's social media. Well, for most part, it used to be Facebook. But in reality, titanium economy, as I said, is industrial tech. The list goes on. Enphase, I don't know how many of you know Enphase here. It looks like you know. It's a great example. This was a company which was trading at 92 cents a share. Why do we know? Because we were very intimately involved with it. 92 cents a share on January 17, 2017, on the verge of going bankrupt. Less than $100 million market cap. Today, that company is worth $30 billion. Why? Because it's same thing, right? This is a sector which knows how to reinvent itself, has got the guts to make it happen. And then I can go through, again, I think there's Heiko I talked about. Casella is, again, I don't know how many of you know Casella. Casella is a waste management company. So John Casella is the founder. He's a 78-year-old gentleman, wonderful guy. He's the only billionaire, or the first billionaire, I can't forget, in the state of Vermont. And you meet him, he's the most down-to-earth guy, half the time driving a pickup truck to go haul waste. It's a waste management company. But the innovation they've driven there is great. Same thing with Middleby. Middleby is a food processing company. So the next time you go to Starbucks, you should check it out because they make the ovens, especially if you're on an airport and you're in a rush to board your plane and you want your oven, you want your muffins heated up fast or your bagel heated up fast without burning it. They make that equipment. So it's that, the list goes on. So let's start off this. Why are we talking about this, right? What's so great about it? Why is it important? First of all, as I mentioned, it is a big part of the US GDP. It's not a thing of the past. It is something which is adding, right? The contribution to the US GDP, it's $400 billion. So it's pretty big. Two is, it's extremely high-paying jobs. Again, I have nothing against services job. I have nothing against Starbucks. But typically, a job provided by the industrial sector is roughly 2.2 times that paid by a services job. So to put things in context, a typical services job pay around $30,000 a year. An industrial job roughly pays $62,000 a year. Good cost, a good salary, enables a family to put food on the table, send the kids to school. It's really, back to what it doesn't matter which politician you hear about, it's a high-paying job. And then if you read the chart on the right, it's a bit hard, but roughly in 420 counties in this country, more than 15% of the jobs are manufacturing jobs. I mean, you normally don't think about it because often we don't talk about manufacturing, but manufacturing/industrial jobs are roughly, in roughly 420 counties. So it is a big part of the GDP. It's not a thing of the past. And for folks who lived through it during the COVID crisis will remember, you need manufacturing. We needed the PPE. We needed the food. We needed the toilet paper. You can't be buying that from China. You need to be close. And that became more interesting, that became more important. But then the politicians jumped in and said, we need to bring it back. Well, of course you need to bring it back. But it's already here, right? It's just the awareness of, it's not like we had completely migrated to a services economy. As I said, if I look at the right, let's talk about the money. Over the last 5 years, this is ending last year, we got a 12% TRS, total return to shareholders, versus 9% for S&P 500. So if you're a shareholder, not a bad place to invest. Roughly gives you 13.5% of ROIC, return on invested capital. Again, if you remember last 5 years, cost of capital was almost zero. Because if your debt was zero and your weighted average cost of capital is roughly 6 or 7%, depending on your risk. Not a bad, what we call, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me. Creates value. So think about it. If you're a company, you're borrowing money from your shareholders in your debt and you're putting it. So it's arbitrage. You're creating value. And as I said, it's not a monolith, right? It's not one. I mean, people say, it's an industrial sector. No, it's not. It's roughly 90 or odd micro verticals. And the best part is they're all doing great. And in each sector, you got 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 companies. Lots of them are in the US, doing great and, as they say, kicking butts, taking names. And sort of when we started writing this book, that was the thing which really appealed to us is, it's not a sector which sort of says, okay, we do stuff, we leave it alone. It really creates a big amplification cycle. What I mean by the amplification cycle is, if you read from the left to the right, it creates high-paying jobs. When you create high-paying jobs, you get really smart people. When you get really good smart people, they get good ideas. They get the good ideas, your workforce becomes great. It starts feeding not just for the company, the shareholders, but the broader stakeholders. And as I said, people, I don't know how many of you have read the book Jamesville. It's The Death of Jamesville, right? It is a company, it's a city in Ohio, when GM left, it fell apart, and it was a gloomsday. And I mean, unfortunately, it did happen. But the corollary to that is Simpsonville in South Carolina. I don't know how many of you guys have been there. If not, you should. It's an unbelievably vibrant city, right? It's not one company, but there are multiple companies. There's BMW, Michelin, Sealed Air. And it's created a vibrant community. As we said, it added more than $20 billion to the GDP. The per capita income is $67,000. And the best part is, I think the unemployment is less than 2% or 3%. So again, that's something we don't talk about. But that, I can say with a high level of confidence, has been triggered by the industrial technology sector. It's been triggered by the titanium economy. And it keeps feeding off itself. And this is yet the best part to come, which is, again, people talk about things of the past. It is not a thing of the past. It is for the future. 1.6 million jobs is to be filled up. We believe there's about $1 trillion of value, $550 to $700 billion to be added. If you look at the wages, especially a lot of people talk about clean tech, sustainability, all of that is enabled by industrials. So what is the best part is, I'm sure most, if not all of you, read on the front page of Wall Street Journal of semiconductors. We have lost the edge. It's going to Taiwan, going to China. We need to solve it. But if you really sort of think hard, semiconductor manufacturing, like how do you make a chip, that equipment is all here in the US. There are three companies, Applied Materials, Lam, KLA Tencor, which are the bedrock. And without that, you can't make a chip. I mean, you can put all the fab you want, you can put all the money you want. That technology is here in the US. And then, as I said, we strongly believe, and the data indicates, and it doesn't matter what we believe, it's a big boost to the GDP. So let's go back to, let's start with the numbers, right? I mean, the numbers always speaks for itself. We went and looked at 10-year cumulative TRS. If you look at the top dark blue line, what we call the titanium economy companies, you look at the light blue, that's S&P, bottom is Dow Jones, so it depends on whether you call the S&P the index or the Dow Jones index, you pick one, doesn't matter. The titanium economy is significantly doing better. So if you're an investor in this room and you say, hey, where should I invest? Not a bad place to invest. And then you sort of say, okay, Phil, this is all outcomes. At Fernway, we say, look, outcomes matter, but what really matters is also what you do and what is the input which drive it, what's the playbook. It's actually not that complicated, right? It's probably one of the interesting things when we were writing the book, we talked to a lot of CEOs in the space, and the common theme which came out to them is they said, look, we are in the basement while the party is happening in the penthouse. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, look, we do all the work. We don't really advertise. And really, when you fly through the airport, how many of you see an ad for a HEICO or a Graco or a Dabico or a Avail Infra? You don't. Because they do their jobs, they do a great job, they deliver value and move on, versus you can see and again, not to make it big, but you can see a software company which doesn't have a single dollar of revenue would have advertised huge in a San Jose airport or San Francisco airport or Chicago airport. You get your funding, what do? You go banner yourself up, right? We are the next best SaaS company for HR. Oh, great, but you don't have a revenue. So they don't do a lot of advertisement, but they have a very clear playbook, which is start with fixing your basics, right? If you don't really fix your core, you really can't do. And as we talk about it at Fernway, it's not about revenue growth, it's not about EPS, it's about cash. You pay bills with cash. I don't know about you, I like seeing cash in my bank account and actually paying my bills with cash. I mean, everything else is a little bit of synthetic numbers. And they do that really well. They figure out how do you drive the growth, how do you delever it, meaning how do you make sure your performance, when you're growing, your cost base remains fixed. When your market changes, your cost base is variable. They do that really well. The second one is, which is very interesting for folks who are in the market, the biggest terminology is multiples, meaning what is the turns on your EBITDA or your earnings the market is willing to pay you. So if your EBITDA is $100 million, you say, hey, I'll pay you $1 billion, 10 times EBITDA. What is very interesting is, if you look over the last 10 years, 15 years, and look at a typical TRS, total return to shareholders, in technology, 92% of the value creation came from multiple expansion. Put it differently, you're willing to pay, I'm making up a number, $1 for EPS growth. Now you're willing to pay $3. It's still the same, you wanted more. It's like buying a house in Manhattan or San Jose or San Francisco where you're like, I just need it more, so I'm going to will you pay more dollar per square foot. Industrials on the other side have had only 30% of their value created by multiple expansion. The remaining 70s, they're actually, as Tina Turner says, she has worked hard for the money, meaning the EPS has gone up, the multiples have gone, the revenue has gone up, the margins have gone up. So it's like, how do you actually get that right and then change your business model? Which is, if you look at how market treats you, when you have a one-time revenue, meaning you do a product revenue, the market gives you X. If you're seen as a recurring revenue, services revenue, and install base, the market is giving you 7 times that. Because why? Because it's more sticky, it's high margin, you don't have to put that much dollars to get it out. So it's really focused on the business model, it's focused on getting the right investor base. And then the last one is M&A. So again, which is very interesting is, people talk about M&A and that's been the lifeline for companies. But it's not about doing the mergers and acquisition. No offense, anybody can make an M&A. If I have money and you're willing to sell, I can buy it from you. It's how do you do it selectively? Put it differently, when do you sell an asset and when do you buy an asset? Titanium economy companies do a very good job of buying companies when it matters to them. So again, I don't want to go back to HEICO, but HEICO has done more than 80 acquisitions. They've done it in such a way, they bought the company at the right price, they've integrated them, and once they brought them on, they got the culture on, and we'll talk about this. Acquisition is not about companies, it's about people, right? It's like the Brady Bunch movie. You're getting 2 families which are very different, how do you put them together? And then the flip side is divesting companies. When do you sell an asset? And that's the hardest part, because when do you want to sell a company? When you don't like it, when it's dropping. But when I don't want a company, neither do you. And so the question is, how do you divest it? And the titanium economy companies, or the titanium economy sector in general, do a really good job of figuring out when to get out of an asset. This is what I talked about. So let's talk about what does this all mean going forward. As I said, look, we talk about headwinds, we talk about all the things which are going to change. We were convinced about this 2 years ago, we were convinced about it a year ago, we're convinced now. People have talked about the new normal, but it's not the new normal, it is a normal, which is you're going to have high inflation or higher inflation, you're going to have higher interest rate, you're going to have a tight labor market, you're going to live in a geopolitical thing. This whole globalization which ran for the last 20, 30, 40 years, again, I'm not taking a political stand, but it doesn't matter, you're going to have fiefdoms. You're going to have the US market, you're going to have the European market, you're going to have the Eastern European market, you're going to have the Chinese market, you have the Asian market, you have the Indian market. So you're going to have that. So as I said, you can't fix it, right? All you know is you just need to know what it is and you need to you just need to react to it. So the question is, given that, what is the learnings to be? What drives differentiation? And again, what is very interesting is when you look at the titanium economy companies, there's actually a couple of really good learnings. One is what we call the micro-vertical focus. Most people, and that includes me, like to do everything. But in reality, if you do everything, you do nothing. So it's about focus. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And the stuff you're good at, double down. For the stuff you're not good at, don't do it. It's very interesting. I was talking to one of the CEOs today, and he asked me, did you buy the First Republic stock? And I said, why would I do that? And he said, well, you could have made a lot of money. I don't know how many of you follow the stock market. And it was at $84 a share, fell down to $21 a share yesterday, and it's back to, $45 a share. I'm not a player, so definitely I didn't buy it. But, I asked him, why do you do that? He said, look, it's not about what the market says, so you have to do your own homework. And if you believe that's a good company, then you should go buy it. Again, I'm not giving you any stock market tips, and don't take that from me. But specifically, there's a very interesting thing is, as they say, it's fear and greed which drives all of us. It's always fear, it's always greed. Right? When we are fearful, we get out. When we are greed, we double down. It's usually hard to do both at the same time. Right? It's like pressing gas and pressing the brakes at the same time. But there is the whole point about as you're going through, call it resilience, call it recession, call it anything, how do you have the resiliency on that, right? How do you make sure like you're ready if things go wrong? But also, how do you actually, while doing that, how are you growing? So we as Fernway, as I mentioned, we left, this is the time to take a pause. This is a sector we really like. If you haven't figured out by now, we are very bullish. We love it because it creates a lot of value. We know this sector. And so a bunch of us left McKinsey to start Fernway. So we are an investment company which invests in the space, but we're not a typical private equity company. We call ourselves an engaged investor operator model, which is we are engaged, we are an investor, we are an operator. And knock on wood, so far we're doing okay. And in our portfolio companies, right now as we're looking at this, we are saying this is the best time to expand. Why? We have a great company, we have a great management team. Politely, what do we care about if markets are blowing up? So we are expanding by adding capacity. When, as they say, right, when everybody is fearful, you should be greedy. And so why? Because we looked at it and say, look, it's a great market where we play in. We have great people. We have great customers. We're going to double down. So, we are eating our own cooking, which is we are playing defense while we're playing offense. And that's going to make a difference, right? This is about how do you actually play which is contrarian. The third one is talent war, right? Which is very interesting. People talk a lot. And I'll be brutally honest, I talk a lot about it. People matter. Who says people doesn't matter? Is anybody in this room says people don't matter? No. Oh, it's a great thing. Oh, people matter. It's not about people matters. What does that really mean? Money is a commodity. If I have $1 and you have $1 is $1. What creates that alpha is the people. And what you find very interesting is how people think about talent. Most companies, at least I've seen, see talent as a cost. Right? It's like, hey, I have a cost. I have 10 people. I have to pay them $100,000. I have to benefit. Very few companies actually see it as a competitive advantage. And this one I can tell you with a high level of confidence because for 21 years or 22 years, I did this at McKinsey and I've been doing this for the last 2 years. You get the right person in the right role, it's a day and night difference. You get the right person in the right role and empower them, it's an even bigger difference. You get the right person in the right role, empower them, and give them the right incentives, game over, right? It's very easy to say, extremely hard to do. And having lived this, I will tell you, everybody talks. Who doesn't say this, right? But actually doing it, very few people do it. And when you do it, it is a huge unlock. I can say this because when we were at McKinsey, we prided ourselves in attracting the best talent. We had a difference at McKinsey. When we left McKinsey to start Fernway, we prided ourselves as making a difference. In our portfolio companies, if you look, having the right management team has made a huge difference, right? So this is like, stating the obvious, which is like, don't kick a puppy, be nice to your mom. It's doing that, but doing it makes a difference. And then culture, right? This is the best part. Again, how many of you have ever heard saying, I have a bad culture? Everybody says, I have a great culture, right? Nobody walks around saying, I'm going to have a shitty culture. Everybody says, oh, culture matters. Well, yeah, matters. What do you mean by that? Right? Well, we have a mission, vision statement. Okay, what's your mission, vision statement? I need to look up the wall. Be nice to a customer and empower our people. Have you ever heard anybody say, be terrible to your customers and treat your people bad? No, right? It really comes down to, when I say culture, it really comes down to three things, right? And it really, really comes down is, how do we work together? Do we trust each other, right? Like when I look at you and say, hey, we're going to get this done. You say, yeah, I'm going to get this done. Or I'm like, I don't trust you. I'm going to go and tell her. I'm going to tell her, and I'm going to check on you, right? Culture is about trust. Trust is about accountability, right? If I trust you, then I'm going to hold you accountable. And am I holding you accountable? You're going to do it. And accountability only matters when there's a consequence management, right? If you don't do this, I'm not going to fire you. But if you don't do this, finish the sentence, right? And so culture really, really comes down to, do we trust? Culture doesn't mean we all are the same, right? And this is where people often make a big difference, right? It's a big kumbaya, right? Oh, we're all great, we're family. First of all, we're not a family. Let's be clear. right? Because trust me, my family is filled with odd guys and a lot of people I don't want to hang out with, right? It's not about family. It's really about three things. Do I trust you? Do we have an accountability model? Meaning you're accountable, right? I always ask in a meeting, who's going to do it? We are going to do it. No. There's no we. It's you or you or you, so that there's very clear accountability. And the third is, what's the consequence, right? It's not about, oh, I'm going to fire you. It's not a fear, right? Because people often get confused. It's like there is a consequence management. You don't do your job, oh, forget it. I mean, I'm the CEO of Funway. I tell this to my investor, if I don't do my job, I'm not going to deliver the commitment I made to my investors, right? And that matters to me. That is the consequence. It's not about losing my job or making the money. That matters. Like standing in front of my investors and saying, look, I committed that I'll make this kind of a return and I didn't, matters. And so it's the culture, and I'll pause for this. I've done a lot of talking, so we'll probably move more to a dialogue. What matters is if you go back, right, it doesn't matter. We're going to live in a period of new normal. Take out the word new. It is normal. High inflation, high interest rates, geopolitical risk, tight supply market. The one thing we didn't talk about is, people talk about labor market tightening. And people said, oh, it's the quiet resignation, the big resignation, all that stuff. Let me let you in on a secret. COVID had nothing to do with it. This is demographics. Why? Just do the math, right? You had World War II. What happened? This is fear. World War II saw a lot of people die. People came home. It doesn't matter whether you're in the US, Japan, India, came back and said, survival. Hey, I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. So between the 45, I'm going to get my time wrong. Between 45 and 70, people got married sooner, and they had more kids. Guess what happens? You have kids, they come to work, you have the supply. Between 70 and 2000, people got married later and had fewer kids. So that's the workforce which is entering the market now. And between 2000 and now, people are getting married even and even later, and people are having fewer and fewer kids. We're not even, in large part of the population, we're not even hitting the 2 number, right? How many kids a woman have. So replacement ratio is 2, if you think of ourselves as a factory. So it's demographics. So the labor shortage is here to stay, or not shortage, the fewer people are going to be entering the market. Healthcare is improving, which means people are going to live longer. If people are going to live longer, the society has to support them. So it's a loss of supply and demand, right? So it's got nothing to do with COVID. It has got nothing to do with government stimulus. It's got nothing to do with, people finding a new religion, Gen Z, millennium. It's got nothing to do with that. It's pure demographics. So that's all. We're going to live with it, right? Geopolitical tension is here to stay. High interest rates is here to stay. Higher inflation is here to stay. Labor shortage is here to stay. That's life. The question is, what do we do? The things we laid out here is going to make the difference, because at least and these are more anecdotal, it's not a correlation formula we run through. When you look at it, companies which have done well, the titanium economy companies, and we looked at 35 companies. As you know, the industrial sector is roughly 4,800 companies just here in the US. I don't know how many of you knew this. And about 80% of them are what we call S5C, sub-$5 billion companies. So it's a very big market. And we looked at 35 companies, but those 35 are not limited. There's way more than that. What are the titanium economy leaders? And you look at this, they do these 4 things right. So again, it's like stating the obvious, like 1 + 1 is 2, wake up in your morning, brush your teeth, go to the shower, go to the gym, don't eat a donut. Yeah, how many of us don't do that? I ate a donut this morning. So it's about exactly, right? But if you do it, it makes a difference. So let me, this is the thing I talked about, so I won't go through this. The last page I want to leave this is just some questions to ask if you're the leader of a company, or if you're joining the workforce, or if you're an investor. These 5 questions really do matter, right? Going counterclockwise. Operating leverage. What do we mean by operating leverage? Right? Operating leverage is very simple, which is, do you have the right cost base to drive revenue? Unfortunately, when you're growing, all cost is variable. So for anything, you need more people. When you're shrinking or your revenue is dropping, all cost is variable, fixed. You need it to be the other way around, right? And that's what leaders do, which is they have a good cost base and they're able to write, they're able to get more, they're able to get better lead time to their customers, they're able to get the product out. And when the market is not doing well, they're able to adjust their cost base. The second one is the one I was talking about, portfolio optimization. That's the most important thing. It's true if you're an individual, it's true if you're an executive, it's true as a company. Because the classical 80-20 works here. You spend 80% of your time on 20% of the things that really matter. And if you're a company, I mean, we saw this with companies like GE and Danaher, where their portfolio was not that great, they were spending a lot of time, it brought them down. And as individuals, as human beings, think about yourself where you spend time. There are a lot of things you spend your time on you shouldn't be. Get somebody else to do it rather than you doing it. The third one is what we call higher quality of revenue. All are equal, some are more equal. Unfortunately, not all revenues are equal. Back to my point about the recurring revenue versus one-time revenue. So it's always good to figure out what revenues are sticky, what revenues are high margin, how do you drive that? I think debt is probably one thing which is on top of mind for most people, which is, it's an old adage. When you don't need debt, people will be more than happy to give you debt. When you need debt, nobody is willing to give you. And if you have debt, they'll come after you when they shouldn't be coming after you. We saw it with SVB Bank. That's true if I'm a debt holder or if it's an individual like you and me, the SVB Bank. I mean, which is a very interesting statistic. When SVB Bank was collapsing, this is a staggering statistic. 41% of depositors, number, went and took money out of the SVB, which was below $250,000, meaning they didn't have to take it, it was FDIC insured, and yet they went and took it out. And not that it triggered, there are a lot of other things which triggered it, but it's a very interesting statistic if you think about it. Human nature, right, which is always like, hey, I'll give you the money till I trust you, when the moment I don't trust you, I'm out. It's like, no, I'm FDIC insured, shouldn't I be like protected? Well, no, I don't trust you anymore. And then the last one is back to where I started and I'll end with, right? Cash matters. Cash is king. Cash is the only thing that matters. If you have cash, it matters. If it doesn't matter, and that's on working capital, right? Working capital is AR, accounts receivable, accounts payable, inventory. And one of the things we say in all of our portfolio companies, guys, I'm glad you have an amazing building in Manhattan. I'm glad you have great accounts receivable from customers. I'm glad you're not paying your suppliers or you're pushing back your terms to your suppliers. Cash matters, right? The only metric I look every day, I have access to the banks of all my portfolio companies. Every morning when I wake up, I brush my teeth, and the first thing I check, I don't even check the Google News or I don't check the weather, is what's my bank balance. Why? Back to my point, cash matters. Anyway, let me pause. I've done a lot of talking. I might have even gone over the time limit, I don't know. Questions, comments? Otherwise, time back to you. Right? People are in entertainment, people are in banks. So we have our manufacturing, but what we are finding is we're finding really hard to find a CNC technician, a guy or a gal who will come and set up the CNC machine. So it's a little bit of an ecosystem effect. I mean, like right now we are expanding our facility in Indianapolis. Finding labor, and then this has got nothing to do with rates. Again, I'm not taking a political stand, right? Just like finding labor, finding manufacturing talenting labor is big in Indianapolis. So if you ask me saying, Nick, on this map, where would you go put your manufacturing? And you take out the shading, I'll tell you like Indianapolis, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, because that's where the labor is, right? But to your flip side, if you look at pretty much every state, it doesn't matter whether it's California, New Mexico, Louisiana, they're all making a push to get onshoring back. Some are more versus the other. And again, without going into political conversations, some states make working very easier. Like we are working with the state, and we're going to be investing about $100 million. And I think I've got like 20 calls from the governor's office, right? Like, what can we do? Tell us what we do. We'll give you the subsidy. And we're putting $50 million. And we're putting $100 million in a different state, and we got no calls, right? Whatever you want, we're going to be not free till next Thursday, and next Thursday between 1 o'clock and 1:05, give us a call, otherwise you're on your own, right? So it's a little bit varied, but I think this onshoring or bringing manufacturing jobs, industrial jobs, they're synonymous, is really a trend. Some states make it easier because there's already an ecosystem. When you have an ecosystem, you have the infrastructure to support it. And some are behind, but everybody's trying to make it happen. Slightly different way, there are 4,800 companies, industrial companies. 2,800 of them are private or private/family-owned companies. 2,000 of them are large. So I can't do the math in my head. Of the 2,000 or odd, which are public companies, 80% are mid-cap. And in the family-owned companies, 90% are less than $5 billion revenue. So, I can't do the math in my head, but I'm going to say predominantly most of them are, that's why those are companies you've never heard of, right? I mean, like, for example, I'll make a pitch for my portfolio company. How many of you have heard of this company called Dabico? I'm pretty sure none of you have. The next time you board a plane, look around. They are the guys who make the boarding bridge, right? So when you board the plane, they do the boarding bridge. They do the PCA, preconditioned air, which keeps the plane hot or cold when you're on the ground. They do the GPU so that the plane is powered, you're not burning jet fuel, environmentally friendly. And they're the ones who put the fuel pits on the ground so that, one, you don't kill people by a truck and it's friendly. And so it's a very interesting company. We own it, but nobody's heard about it, right? Extremely profitable and probably one of the highest value add because without that, you can't do it. For example, we got a SOS call from a small city, and we'll leave the city out. They said, hey, we need 11 gates like in the next 3 weeks. And we're like, it doesn't work this way, right? We run really, with a long lead time. And we said, why? They said, hey, look, we have a very famous college in town, and we want to, in the league we are winning, and we're going to the next thing. So we've got a lot of these alumni who are going to be flying in. These corporate planes are pulling in, and we just have one gate. We need to have multiple gates to get these billionaires and millionaires out, and we just want our town to have a great airport. We're like, well, you should have thought about it 6 months ago, right? But it's good business for us, but it's very interesting. Without these equipment, you can have billions of dollars a plane, but when it lands on the ground, it needs to be serviced, it needs to be fueled. And so that's what is very interesting. Back to my original quote, the party is happening in the penthouse, these companies are in the basement. It's in the US, but in China and India and Middle East, how important is this going to be? Did I capture your question right? This is very interesting, right? Because the Industrial Revolution, as the name indicates, started in the 1600s. It's been going on. So you can say you don't have a high-tech sector in Africa. Yeah, okay, there's no software company. These industrial companies are everywhere. Look at a cement, which is probably the most common thing because you need to build a product. It's pretty much in every country. Tell me one country which doesn't have its own cement factory. So I would break this question into 2 parts, which is there is industrial companies in every country. But then this is sort of like the layers of the cake, which is, do you have the more higher value in what I call the industrial tech? So like take food processing, which is probably one of the best example. Most, if not all of the food processing companies are here in the US or Western Europe. Why? Again, not the thing. US and Western Europe process way more food. I grew up in India. We didn't have processed food, right? What did you do? You went to the grocery store, you bought the food, you ate it, and you're done. You never stored food for a week, right? US has been in the forefront of processing food, whether it is a corn or bread or chicken, it's been there. Now with the affluence coming on, right, like China is a great example, India is a great example, there's a higher demand of not only the Western brands, but more processed food. So now there's all of a sudden companies saying, hey, I need to have a food processing company. Well, it's a little too late because all of the technology, the IP, the ecosystem is here. So to answer your question, I would sort of say this is always important. The jury is out who's going to win. But for most part, if you look at industrial companies, unlike a tech company, unlike a retail company, they're not global. So for example, Dabico is a bad example, but you look at the other company we acquired, Avail, 93% of our revenue is in the US. Politely, we don't care about the rest of the market. We're like, this market is big enough for us, we'll be here, right? So you're absolutely right, there's going to be a lot of value going forward, but I think the jury is still out how important it is and who captures. People asked us why we wrote this book, and I had nothing to do, that's a different topic. But it was really to appeal to the 2 biggest suppliers. Suppliers of capital and supplier of talent. And you hit the nail on the head. For a long time, and I had nothing to do with this, neither Titanium Economy had nothing to do with it, it was not cool to invest in the industrial companies. If you were an asset manager, where did you invest? Google, Facebook, Alibaba, Baidu. Why? Because everybody knew about it, and it's like you can't go wrong with this. Like it's an old adage, you can't go wrong with buying IBM. What do you think changed investing in industrial making cool? Changed exactly 11 years ago. A small company called Tesla, an auto company, and look, I was one of the skepticals who said, you're never going to have a successful auto company after 110 years. And again, I'm not taking any political stand, and Elon has got his own idiosyncrasies, so I'm not going to go into that. But what is very interesting is Tesla proved that you can invest in industrial companies and make a lot of money in it. And all of a sudden, people said, oh, wait a minute, it's not like the old, you're preordained to win or preordained to lose. And since then, you've found a lot more companies come on or investors come in. AgTech is great. So if you look at the innovation happening in agricultural, it's coming in, wind tech, clean tech. So I think, I don't want to declare victory yet, but I'm going to say the capital problem is slowly getting solved. I mean, we looked at Fernweh. Fernweh, we invest exclusively in industrial companies, and we've got investors piling up to put money behind us. So I'm going to say we're okay. Your second question is absolutely right. If you're a young engineer from MIT or Caltech or Chicago, Northwestern, pick the good schools, you're not putting up your hand and saying, I want to go work in an industrial company. So that's a big push we need to make. This was one of the big reasons. I've given this talk at a lot of campuses saying, it's a great livelihood. You can have a great job, and politely, you don't have to get in the rat race, right? You don't have to be in the Silicon Valley. You don't need to be in Boston. You don't need to be in Austin. You can be anywhere. This is diverse. This is well spread. So I do think the flywheel is starting. It is nowhere close to being solved. And then in craft, so this is like welders and plumbers and maintenance technicians. Back to my demographics, most of these people who learned are in their 50s and 60s. They're retiring. The population is not coming in. And I think US is doing a better job. Germany is doing a fantastic job. India is doing a terrible job, and they're going to face it. They have 1 billion people, but they're going to run out of it in getting the trade skills. So for example, one of the things we do at Fernweh is we launched this thing called First Domino. This is a pro bono effort of giving back. Very selfishly, the reason we did it is we said, look, we want to be able to find talent and train them, right? You're a high school kid. You want to go to college? Fantastic, go do it. We want you to. But if you're, excuse me, but if you're a high school kid and you're sort of saying, I don't know what to do, we take them, we train them, and then we put them, I'm going to call it guaranteed, but you have a guaranteed job in our portfolio company. And we are partnered with a few things. Again, small things, but it's making a difference. So to answer your question, is it a problem? You bet. Is it getting better? The optimistic part of me says yes, but the realistic part of me says it's going to be a while before it gets.
I guess kind of off of that, do you see, so obviously a lot of automation coming into the industrials. A lot of the people that I've spoken with said that they want to use automation to support or augment operators or people with the other guys supposed to replace people, right?
Oh, thank you.
Compare that to additional service providers. People like integrators or VARs who are coming in and helping support industrials to actually do better with more technology, but also just help with other services. How do you see these forces coming together to support smaller companies maybe versus some of the larger companies in the space?
Short answer, I don't know the answer to your question because the jury is out. But what I will tell you is I believe in capitalism, right? Capitalism is an amazing thing. If there's money to be made, money will be made. If an innovation is needed, innovation will be made. So just to give you an example, we invested in this company called WSI. It does high-end welding. And I don't know how much of you know about the space. Welding is a pretty painful job. And it is dangerous, and it's hot. And even if, it's an extremely high-paying job. So a typical welder makes about $70 an hour. So put things in context. It's not a low-paying job. But you still can't find enough welders if you want to. So guess what the industry did, right? They had two choices. Attract more people. They did. That's why the salary went from $40 to $50 to $60 to $70 or whatever that number is. Or people said, oh, let's automate some of the tasks, which can be. So WSI, we have basically created the technology where literally you can set up the welding and it's automatically done, right? It's got a welding head. You can be far off. You can be sitting in your nice air-conditioned room, and it's like the joystick, you can do it. So to answer your question, I think that's a beautiful part of capitalism. That's a beautiful part of innovation. I don't know the answer to your question, but if there is a need, it'll happen, right? I mean, so this is where I'm more optimistic. Like there is a shortage. On the flip side, again, I don't want to badmouth. There are a lot of companies which are like, oh, we are an automation expert. I'm like, well, why do you want to be in hammer looking for a nail, right? Versus if an automation makes sense, the market is going to push for it. And there are a lot of good companies which are getting it done.
Right, but talent's not going to be, I guess, talent's very important, but it's not the only solution to this problem.
Yeah.
It's required, but obviously technologies are hopefully going to help.
No, but also in a lot of cases, talent is absolutely not the solution. So again, I don't want to be making a pitch for ourselves, but if you look where we go in is making a welding inside a Coke drum, which is dangerous. I mean, I don't care whether you pay me $70 or $700, I'm not going inside that Coke drum, right? You bet it's hot, it's small. I mean, I have to keep my hands like this, and I mean, it ain't gonna happen, right? And in those cases, automation works. So it's, in a lot of cases, and this is why in countries like India and China, normally they don't do automation because they're like, hey, we got labor, we'll figure somebody out. And even countries like India and China is now pushing a lot of automation because it's not about the labor, can the labor do that work? And obviously India, and they have a tail, they'll do it, but that is what is driving a lot of that automation.
And it's demographics.
It's demographics.
So for us in Germany, we know that we will not have enough people to do the work which is needed. So the only solution is to automate as much work as possible, which can be automated, that the people who are there can then do the job which can be.
Bingo. Yeah. And Germany is in the same thing, right? And Germany has even a bigger problem, which is compared to the US at least. I mean, again, US is not any better, but immigration is there. Germany, immigration is very tight. I mean, they're opening up, but still just a society where it is. So those things do drive that big change.
Can you talk more about how specifically to go about identifying the right talent for a given role and then convincing them to actually come to your company and work in that role and keeping them there and just sort of maintaining like high quality talent and how that sort of works in practice?
And we throw dartboard. Look, that's $1 million billion question, right? I mean, and again, this one I actually violently disagree when you read mass media and say, oh, Gen Z is different and millennial is different. Look, that's not true, right? When I was 22, there was a bunch of things I wanted to do and a bunch of things I didn't want to do. I worked for a company which I hated. And then I worked for McKinsey for 22 years, which I loved, right? And now I do Fernweh, which I love. It all comes down to basic things, which is, do you really love what you do, right? It's an old adage. If you like what you're doing, you're going to be good at it. If you're good at it, you're going to get doing it, right? So there's an element of just, again, I'm taking out all the buzz. It comes down to human psychology and egos. Nobody out there wants to do a terrible job. Everybody wants to do a great job. So first, you just have to make sure people know what they're doing, right? This is back to my point. Once you get them, you have to empower them, right? I can't hire you and then tell you everything to do. Most people, as you probably know, they don't quit a company. They quit their boss. And if the boss is a jerk, it usually is a multiplier effect. So for that, one of the things we do is we sort of say, look, when we hire a bad employee, that means we are hiring 6 bad employees. It's true. We have looked at this. We have looked at it multiple times. So who you hire matters because it's not just them, right? How they manage people, what's the culture they drive, back to the point. And the third thing is, incentives matter. I mean, people, again, if you read all the public media, they're, oh, Gen Z is not about, they want a work-life balance and they don't care about money. Guys, that's not true at all. Let's be very clear. Everybody wants money. How many of you here say, I don't want money? Yeah, I like a lot of money with no little work. Yeah, I mean, of course, right? That becomes a null set. But what matters even more, right, which is where we are very big, and my former employer, McKinsey, was very good, which is not everybody is right for every role, right? It's just coming to the mutual conclusion and say you have to exit. Because most often what happens in a lot of companies is somebody's in the job, they're not doing a great job, everybody knows they're not doing a great job, but nobody wants to call it out, and so the toxicity drives, right? So to your point, it's about hiring the right person. It's about empowering them so that They know what good looks like. They're able to deliver it. And God forbid, if it's not, move on, right? I mean, look, Fernway is a pretty young company. We are only 2 years, but we have exited a bunch of people because very quickly we realized it was not a good fit. We called them and just said, look, we'll give you a 1 year severance, right? This is not about the money, but go find a different job because we made a hiring mistake or you've made a mistake. Like, for example, we don't do interviews, right? Because politely in an interview, I can lie, you can lie. So in ours, we actually, when we hire somebody, we put them through like what we call a 5-day job. They come, they join our meetings, they sign NDA and everything. They go to the site, they do it. And say, do you like us? Do you like what we do? Because if you don't like me, I mean, I've got a lot of cooks. This is how I'm going to be. This is how she's going to be. This is how they're going to be. And that is turned out to be really good, right? I mean, like, we're back to my point, like, we have amazing people in our portfolio companies. We have amazing people in our partner companies. And that makes a huge difference because, look, the worst thing you can do is hire the wrong person and keep them there. It's okay to hire the wrong person, but then just say, guys, we made a mistake. So other thing we offer at Fernway is we join, and if within 30 days people say they make a mistake, we're like, fantastic, right? No question asked, you can leave anytime. You don't have to feel obligated like you have to stay. And those kind of small things make a difference, right? Because at least, I mean, we are a small company. What we have found so far is when you empower people, like in Fernway, people say, what do you want me to do? I'll say, I don't know, you go figure it out. We don't have roles, we don't have titles. People just go get stuff done, right? Back to my point, cash is king. It's about getting the value, it's about driving the impact. Do it the right way, do it the legal way, right? I mean, we don't have a playbook, or we don't have a handbook, right? I mean, literally have a 1-page handbook, which says all the stuff, what we believe in, what's our beliefs. I mean, we don't even call it our mission value, and then say, go figure it out. And so far, it seems to be working. Any other questions, comments? If not, I will stop. Thank you, folks. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.